Hey everyone, Mick Liubinskas here. Just got the latest global startup ecosystem report from Startup Genome. It's a 2025 report. Um, Pollenizer actually was one of the partners on the really early ones. We're through Bjorn Lasse Herman and the crew. It's great to see it still going. It's always really good to see. I don't think it's a perfect instrument. Nothing is, but it's definitely got some really interesting content and shines a light on what's happening around the world. So. Just a quick look at it, I think, is just to go through some of the highlights from our perspective again in here. Um, they've got obviously Oceania is included, and they talk about what they do. Getting through to some of the interesting information here. The first one is growth. Like the first thing here, looking at really interesting to see Beijing with just massive growth. Some from LA, Tokyo, and Paris, but most of the ecosystems actually have changed in value over the last year. But really interesting to see those four that have actually grown. And you can see Beijing, obviously, with massive access to the China market. LA is really interesting as a alternative place, and I think interactions with media and other reasons. Tokyo have been obviously investing, and I think Paris with Station F, etc. But yeah, really interesting to see some of those implications over time. So getting through to some of the key things that I thought were worth having a mention. Scrolling. So the first thing is, though, in terms of the overall ranking, no Australian city makes the top 20. So you've got Silicon Valley right at the very top, almost getting 10 marks for everything. And some of the key things, and some of this is definitely fairly subjective, but it is, I think, overall a reasonably good marker. And interesting around knowledge in terms of the difference between why Beijing is getting 10 versus Silicon Valley getting 8. But one thing you'll notice, I think, is nearly all these cities are in big markets. So that, I guess the difference is Tel Aviv, which is obviously heavily export focused. And then we have some possibly ones you might consider smaller in Canada, but they are still have proximity to very big markets. In the 20 to 40, we have Sydney and Melbourne, and some interesting views here in terms of some of these numbers. So, Sydney has strong performance and funding. There's more detail below this. Melbourne, fairly low, like a one for funding and one for knowledge, I think is really tough. You'll also notice they've got AI native here. That's a new one, and obviously leaning into how big AI is as a mega trend. So we'll break down those numbers a little bit. A key one here, I think this, and it doesn't actually really specifically say for Australia, but they reference high global connectedness as a really important factor of in terms of what's happening and what makes it successful. And that I think is really particularly important for Australia, given that we have a small spread out market and not a high innovative purchasing market from corporates and government. Other two ones here, data is the lifeblood. So this really goes to the importance of, uh, excuse me, it goes to the importance of things like the Startup Must Start report and, massive kudos to Murray Herbst and the team, and everyone who's been behind that for many years. It's something, huge shout out to Olivia Utantan for the Climate Salad industry report that we've done for the last couple of years. We're trying to get one up for this year, but that data is really important to get out into the industry. It's just such a shame it doesn't get nearly as enough support that it should from government, corporates, researchers, investors. It's just so important to have that data. This is global data; it's useful, but that industry specific and Australian specific data is also really valuable. And the point over here as well, startup events are strategic infrastructure. I think this is, events is obviously not where the work's done. Like, it's not where you build your product or your team or grow your company, but bringing people into your space, into your country, especially Australia, when considering we're so far away. And I think it's something New Zealand has done really well over the last 20 years. They've just said we've just basically going to fly in some amazing speakers, and that acts as a catalyst to bring other people into town. Probably I'll say Evoke Ag is probably the best. South Start is quite good, but I think in terms of international audiences, Evoke Ag is probably the best in Australia. We tried this really in climate tech, bringing Sophie Purdom over. We're really trying later in the year to bring some international speakers as well, but I think it's really valuable to be able to bring that in. Just looking at some of the success factors, we've got here exit ecosystem and startup success. Again, Sydney's 545 and Melbourne's 318. So they've got the measures there and how they measure that, which I think is quite good to have those numbers, and I think they are good measures. I think in terms of garbage in, garbage out, like what's the data here? Why has Melbourne only got one for ecosystem value? Now, I think launch vehicles are has been really strong. Startup Victoria, I know they've changed to the bigger startup network, but I think Victoria's had a lot of big wins in previous tech booms, such as with real estate.com.au, car sales, and Seek, etc. And I think they've got it might be smaller than Sydney, but I think it's actually more connected and valuable. But maybe it's actually about the value. What they put in here is the value that actually comes out of it. How do you actually progress? So maybe there's a difference there in terms of just the connectedness versus actual impact. And then we've got funding. So both of these interesting in terms of access. Significant difference between Sydney and Melbourne. I'm not quite sure about that. I think there's a lot of capital in Melbourne as well. Sydney obviously has some scale. I just don't think that gap is that big between them. I think both of them are still subscale, especially for deep tech. So software might be significantly easier. So it does depend on where you're drawing the line here. Market reach. This is one I thought was quite interesting. Like, how big is your local market? And again, it could be some of this is around actual GDP. So we've obviously got a decent economy in Australia, but I think there's a big difference between actually purchasing products, the size of it, and buying the products. There's obviously something I rant on about a lot, so I won't go into it too much. Then you're looking at scale up production and global reach. Look, Australia has good connectedness around the world, and most of the world seems to like us. But in terms of ratio of tech startups with international secondary office, again, one thing might be actually that what is not counted in here is the leakage of early companies that go international and don't come back. Then we're looking at talent experience. This is the big one, and it was really hard 20 years ago. There was just hard to get anyone out of a safe job into startups. That's massively improved with Atlassian, Culture Amp, and Canva. Creating ESOP that works and people have got payouts. That just has a huge impact on getting people into this space. It's 10 to 20 times as big. Interesting about life sciences talent we've got quite high rankings here. In terms of actually deep tech, again, I think there is great talent. Getting them to actually come, like someone mechanical engineer or chemist or biologist, to come and work in a startup, I think is still hard in Australia. So again, it's going to be really, really different based on the type of business you're bringing in here. Um, Interesting, again, quite low rankings for Melbourne in terms of experience, which again, it totally depends on how you measure that and the participation. But interesting conversations. AI native transition. So, how much AI are you doing? Really low for Sydney here, 2 and 5, and in terms of knowledge, 2 and 1. So, obviously, I'm really deep within the AI. I'm having lots of conversations almost every day, so I'm seeing a lot of it. But clearly, Sydney is lacking there in terms of being able to show those AI companies. Um, then we get to some emerging ecosystems. These are from emerging markets, but you'll see that none of the Australian companies, cities get into this ranking. We do have Brisbane there at the 31 to 40, which is great to see. Again, I think it's one of the most connected ecosystems. It's really supportive. It's got a really good base. That they do a lot of regional city, but again, where that's a long way down. You're 39th position there, or 40th position, and couldn't find the other cities in the space. So even as we get to 100, we've got Budapest, Kiev, and other smaller cities, but they're within bigger markets. Again, I still think that's a key challenge. So yeah, there is some really interesting data here. We've talked about in terms of Oceania, we've got We've got Sydney here at the top, Melbourne, Brisbane, Auckland, Perth, Adelaide, Wellington, Canberra, Christchurch. So, I think again, one of our challenges is that they're all quite good, and there is no one big dominant city. I think and one of the things you'll notice about Europe is London, Paris, Amsterdam, Berlin. There is a single strong city in all those countries. Munich and Berlin were really sort of um, competitive, but then Berlin, I think, stepped up significantly, and I think there are benefits to a country of having that. I know that fuels the rivalry between Melbourne and Sydney, but I think that it is just the reality of how things actually work. We're going to try to get down to some of these really specific reports. If I can get down to Australia, where are we? Oh dear me, we're right down the bottom here somewhere. Oh, here we go. So we've got the Oceania reports, and so you get a an update by city, and we've just got Brisbane, Melbourne, and Sydney. I think it's probably through their partnerships. Brisbane first here with some good highlights. We've got obviously Gilmore Space, which is great, and a full report on the ecosystem. So it's good to look at that and to give some insights. They're fairly low seed round numbers. They certainly think competitively. It's sad to see that it looks like it's decreased pretty significantly in the last few years. Um, and again, I think that's probably just macroeconomically. Funding's been tough. We're in a bit of a down cycle. So I think the core of Brisbane is definitely strong, and they put aerospace, health, and sports tech as the top markets there. Melbourne again. I think you've got Kate from LaunchVic here with a quote. I think LaunchVic and hopefully the resurgence of Global Vic. I think their investment through universities is great. Again, I think it's a really active, positive community, and they're looking at life science, fintech, and AI as their big marketplaces. Sydney, Investment New South Wales are a big supporter through this, which is great to see, and some a little bit less decrease with that macroeconomic drop. Decent size in terms of ecosystem value, some exit growth over the last number of years, which I think is positive. Interesting, 10.9 years to exit. And this is a nice reality check for any entrepreneurs getting started. Like, that's an average. Okay, so this is not. We had Spreets and Pollenizer, which was 13 months, but then we have other businesses like Lawpath, which are still growing and growing strong. So things do take long. Great for me. The top sector here in terms of strength is climate tech, although doing it as a single word, which I don't really do. They didn't give us much of a plug here, but I think in terms of Energy Lab doing amazing work, which has obviously had a big positive impact on Sydney. Greenhouse launched over the last few years. Climate Salad, obviously, and our work based here in lots of events. But that's really, really exciting to see that climate tech support being seen there. Um, so that's it from me. Just wanted to share that genome report for this year. It's well worth a look. You've got to put your email address in to access it. I would love your feedback and thoughts. And again, I think this it comes at a really interesting time post-election in Australia. And we see again, I mentioned Global Vic in Victoria. I don't know, Global Vic, Breakthrough Victoria, getting a resurgence in terms of funding and activity, which is great. And we should see a big flow through federally with National Reconstruction Fund, Made in Australia, Future Made in Australia, Arena getting more funding, CFC getting more funding. So I think for the cities and for climate tech, I think we should be looking at 3 years of growth here and some really improvement on those numbers. Excited to see what happens next. Thanks all.